next card we come on to is card number 3. This is the card known as the Empress. Now, the number 3 within itself is quite an interesting number, because number 3 is it's the number of stability.
Really?
Yes.
Dynamic activity. It's like a triangle. 4
Exactly.
is stability.
Well, 4 is a different kind of stability. 4 is it's much more grounding and building. It's much more of it's got a very structure. You know, they talk about the 4 cornerstones. But the 3, this is one of the reasons they used to say the olden chairs, for example, the women who used to milk the cows used to have the 3-legged, because it's a place of abundance, and it's a place of stability. The Empress, very often in a lot of tarot decks, you will see her. She's sitting down. She's pregnant. That which was initiated with the Fool's journey, the beginning, and the ability to have opportunities and to make magic happen and develop rely on your intuition. Here is where it's becoming. It's turning into something. It's becoming something. Something's beginning to manifest. Hence why she's pregnant. A pregnant woman, very often, you know, depending on the cycle, the time of pregnancy, she's waiting to give birth to something. So the Empress, you can see she's very content. Very often, her surroundings are quite, they're quite nice. They're quite beautiful. So this card represents abundance. It represents perhaps a particular stage in life where somebody's reached a particular a nice place, a great feeling, an uplifting feeling.
She's in gestation. It
Yes.
hasn't yet come to fruition. Yeah. So that's important in terms of the pregnancy.
Yeah.
But I'd like to also bring forward the point that the Empress is the consort of the Emperor. So
Yes.
they are the rulers of the material kingdom
Yes.
to get the co-rulers. So the Empress is sitting there and kind of assuming, this will come to me. So this is a kind of a receptive card that comes from a place of confidence. She knows she deserves it. She knows she can have it. She knows she has abundant resources at her disposal through the population of whom she rules to get what she needs. So when it shows up, it's also saying, have confidence in yourself. Because you can attract, because the resources are there and you're on the way to beginning to manifest it. It's very much a card of, you can have what you want. And it's very important for people who have confidence issues, and, it's showing how they can right or rebalance that within themselves.
Yeah. Now we move on to the following card, which is card number 4, which is the Emperor. The Emperor, very often he's seen as somebody who's quite, you can see he's sitting down as somebody who's in a position of authority. So even in the reading, sometimes it can, mean that you are in this position, or maybe you perhaps need to step up where you can be in this position. The Emperor is somebody who's quite stern, quite firm, somebody in authority, somebody in a very powerful position, somebody who's in the driver's seat, who knows what they want and knows how to go and get it. So with the card number 4, very often when this card comes up, it's indicating here that one has to recognize this position, whether it's in their life, maybe there's too much of it, or where there's a lack of it, and this is what is necessary in their particular life. And again, depending on the context in which it comes out, it's really pointing towards a time of stability, authority, structure, responsibility, and all of those kind of things.
I also think, in addition to that, to just add a little bit to what Israel said, is not only about authority, it's about action in the world.
Yeah.
The Emperor holds the boundaries of the land. He holds the rule of the land. And that's why he's red, so it's Mars. It's about, okay, I will fight for it, but if I don't have to fight, I can negotiate. Yeah. But I need to make decisions, and I need to put those decisions into place so that the structure, number 4, of my world is aligned properly. So it's saying, stand your ground, be decisive, fight when you need to, but understand that you don't always have to battle. You just have to sit on your throne and say, well, this is how it is for me, or this is what I propose. What do you think? You know, that
is the Hierophant, or sometimes pronounced as the Hierophant. You will, again, depending which deck you're using, you will generally get the same theme. Very often it's a religious figure. Depending on the tarot deck, it could be a pope or a bishop, or a religious leader of some sort, or a shaman or centaur, as in the mythic deck. And this is a card that tends to have a somewhat of a faith, religious, and philosophical meaning to it. We've got in the previous card where we have the Emperor, where Nina pointed out it's somebody who takes action, it's about boundaries, it's about leadership, and those kind of qualities. Well, with that comes wisdom, with that comes advice, with that comes faith. And this is what this card essentially is about. I mean, very often when it comes up in a reading, it's indicating that perhaps maybe the person maybe need to seek some kind of advice or some kind of guidance. Very often there is also an element, there's also a very traditional element that's very often pinned with this card as well. Very often it can be pointing towards people who may be a bit stuck or a bit rigid in their philosophical beliefs or philosophical views. You know, in the olden days, and still today to some degree, religious leaders like bishops, popes, imams, rabbis, these are people who we go to for advice, you know, in various things in our life, or if we're having difficulties in our life, we go to see them for advice. So very often this card is a card that is indicating towards wisdom, faith. Perhaps maybe there may be sometimes we may believe in something. Our faith has been tested in some kind of way, and we have been asked to perhaps maybe question it. And that's why sometimes there is that rigidity, because sometimes we become very rigid in our faith and in our belief structures.
It very much links into the number 5, because this card is number 5 in the Journey of the Fool, and 5 is the number of, well, it's the number of the senses, it's the number of expansion, and sometimes distraction. So when you're distracted, when you don't know those answers, when you feel that you're running around, you have to consult your inner wisdom. And it's also about the potential for taking hold of your own spiritual authority in life, because all masculine cards have to do with going out and doing things, where all the feminine cards have to do with a much more internal or receptive process. So this is saying, okay, I'm going to make this spiritual or philosophical judgment, and then I'm going to action it in some kind of way. In similar to the Emperor card, who's making secular decisions or decisions about the mundane life. This is about spiritual priorities and right and wrong, etc. The other thing that I often think of in this card, and is proven to me, is it can be a card of marriage.
Yes,
you know,
I can see
receiving a spiritual blessing from on high, the spiritual authority. So, but you have to see other cards that come up. It's not necessarily that. But marriage, perhaps in the spiritual sense, which we will come to with the Lover's card later on in a different way, where there is this bringing through of spiritual authority from the person who is the power channel.
The next card is card number 6, and here is where we move on to the Lovers. And I believe Nina mentioned about the Lovers just very briefly when we were speaking about the previous card, which was the Hierophant. The Lovers, very often it gets this idea that it's to do with relationships. And it can be, and very often it does come out in relationship context. But essentially, what the Lovers card is about, it's about being able to make choices, being able to make judgments. because even relationships on some level are about the choices we make. We choose to be with a particular person who we may be attracted to, for whatever reason. We have the ability to be able to make a judgment that, oh, I want to be with him or want to be with her, based on where we're at in terms of consciousness. So this is a card essentially that's indicating being able to perhaps make a choice. Perhaps the person, and again, it has to be in context with whatever the question is or whatever the reading is about, because being able to make a choice about something could be pertaining to anything in life. It could be to work, it could be relationships, it could be a number of things. So the Lover's card is really showing us here that we're at a particular stage where now we have to make choice. So like the previous card, because again, the journey of the Fool that we spoke about from the beginning, you can really see the progression of how each card is moving on to the next. So the previous card where we spoke about the Hierophant, where it's about the spiritual, it's the moralistic, it's the ethical principles that come into play. Once that has been presented to us, now we have to make that choice. So this is where this card now comes in saying, well, now you need to make the judgment, you definitely need to make the choice. And we have to be wise enough to be able to make a conscious choice, a conscious decision, that is going to be appropriate for us.
So interesting, because in making choices, we have here, this is the choices to have harmony in your life, which is what the number 6 is about.
Yeah.
And of course, 6 is a double 3.
Yeah.
So 3s, we said before, are all about kind of stability, but from a dynamic perspective.
Yes.
And here is a dynamic. We've all heard of, the love triangle, that
Yes.
kind of thing. And here we have the judgment of Paris. So,
Yes.
Paris, the man, is looking at the 3 different Venuses. Who is the most beautiful? Is it the maiden, the mother, or the crone? That kind of thing. But in this card, we can see another thing. We have the masculine, the feminine, and the spiritual elements coming through. And so this isn't about a man and a woman and spirit. This is about the masculine and feminine and how they interact within you. Because every woman has a masculine element within themselves and every man has a feminine element. So are you acting in a balanced way from spirit? And is the choices that you're making in harmony, not only between your masculine and feminine self, but particularly in alignment with your spiritual knowing? So the Lover's card, in essence for me, is not just about those kind of choices. It's also about loving yourself. Having enough self-esteem, having enough sense of your own personal connection to your sense of purpose in life and how you're going to manifest it in the world.